Today, we're 24 hours away from Joe Biden officially becoming president of the United States. Now, it's a hard job during normal times, but it's 2021, so we're way past normal. Plus, Biden wants to raise the federal minimum wage for the first time in more than a decade. We explain the costs and benefits of a $15 minimum wage on Main Street. And finally, Cruise, which is GM's self-driving car unit, just got another round of financing and a big valuation upgrade thanks to Microsoft. I'm MacKenzie Sigalos, and this is CNBC After Hours. Stocks finished higher across the board, with earnings season getting started in earnest. Big bank stocks like Goldman Sachs and Bank of America kicked off the day. And then streaming giant Netflix capped it off, releasing earnings after the bell. Now, the company reported profits that were lower than what Wall Street expected. But for Netflix, people care about subscribers, and those numbers were great. Netflix beat estimates for new global subscribers by a few million, bringing its total subscriber number past the 200 million milestone. What's more, the company is making so much money right now that it's considering buying back stock, which makes investors richer by taking shares out of the market. So that's what's happened on Wall Street today. But tomorrow, all the action is in Washington, D.C. for the inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden. Like we said, he's got a hard job in front of him. Here's what we mean. It's been 4 years since President Donald Trump took office, but it's that last year, 2020, that is no question the one that will cement his legacy. There was a global pandemic, the highest unemployment rate since the Great Depression, racial unrest not seen since the 1960s, and a violent mob storming the U.S. Capitol. It was a lot, and it set the stage for what President-elect Biden will have to contend with, starting with the COVID-19 pandemic. Vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna are out there, approved and ready to go, but supply shortages are hampering the state-led distribution efforts. So far, more than 31.1 million doses have been distributed across the country, with only 12.3 million people being inoculated, according to the CDC. Now, Biden's plan? Well, he wants to vaccinate 100 million people in 100 days. He's planning to use FEMA and the National Guard to build vaccination centers across the country. He also plans to invoke the Defense Production Act, which would allow the government to compel private companies to produce more vaccine materials. And what about the economy? The unemployment rate now rests at about 6.7% in the United States. A far cry from the 14.8% level that we saw in April 2020, but still not great, especially for workers in the hard-hit retail and restaurant sectors. Biden's plan is a $1.9 trillion stimulus bill, complete with $1,400 direct payments, hundreds of billions of dollars in state and local aid, and a federal minimum wage hike, which we'll get into later. It's an ambitious plan with a huge price tag. Goldman Sachs raised its economic growth forecast for the U.S. after the plan was released, but skeptics point to the deficit and the looming risk of inflation as reasons to be worried. And that's not to mention the widening rift between liberals and conservatives in the United States. The most recent example of extreme polarization leading to the Capitol siege earlier this month and turning Washington, D.C. into a virtual fortress for the inauguration tomorrow. This is a long way of saying that Biden has a lot to accomplish in a short amount of time. Okay, let's get to our sound check. Here's a roundup of the day's biggest action and what the top newsmakers and business leaders had to say on CNBC's airwaves.
Let me underscore that progress on economic growth is contingent on an effective vaccine rollout program globally. I urge political leaders at all levels and across all jurisdictions to do everything possible to implement a coordinated and comprehensive distribution plan.
I do think, and I've said this before, at some point demand is going to become an issue. Right now we're working through a 65 and over population where demand is very intense. There's going to be a lot of intense demand even in younger cohorts, but I think once we get to 100 million, maybe 120 million vaccines, the demand's going to get soft.
The Treasury Secretary has to be a voice for fiscal sanity, and I pledge to do that. Our finances need to be on a sustainable long-run course, and that's very important for us.
Obviously, I think it positions Virgin Orbit really well. We're the only company in the world that is offering an air launch system. So I think, we're now in a stage where we want to ramp things up. We will raise some outside finance to take it to the next stage now that we've proven the concept.
We mentioned the federal minimum wage earlier. Biden wants to raise it to $15 an hour. That's more than double where it is now. And if it happens, it would be the first time that anyone has touched the federal minimum wage since 2009, more than a decade ago. We spoke with CNBC's Kate Rogers about whether Main Street could handle paying workers $15 an hour.
Main Street is welcoming President-elect Biden's plans for more small business aid in the form of grants and also financing for struggling small businesses around the country. But advocacy groups are debating another one of the president-elect's proposals, which is hiking the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. That more than doubles today's rate of $7.25 an hour. Small business advocacy groups like the SBE Council and International Franchise Association warning that the move could slow an already challenging recovery. And for many, raising the minimum wage means raising wages across the board, in addition to current concerns about rising costs within the supply chain. Small business owners like Patrick Guay, owner of 4 Muya franchise restaurants in Massachusetts and Connecticut, are weighing what such a hike means for operations and how he'll handle the costs.
I'm not sure that it's fair to burden everything on the small business owner and then have us make the decision as to how much of this do we want to, or are we going to have to pass on to our customers.
Business owners around the country will likely be weighing similar decisions, but one thing's for sure, the minimum wage hike is popular. Pew Research from 2019 shows that 2/3 of Americans support a $15 an hour minimum wage. Many private and small businesses around the country have already been facing higher wages because the federal minimum wage has been stagnant for more than a decade now. States, municipalities, and also bigger businesses around the country are kind of taking matters into their own hands. Once the federal minimum wage goes up, if this does wind up coming to fruition, that will wind up hiking wages for workers around the country at small businesses, particularly in states that have not hiked their pay in a progressive fashion like we've seen many states and municipalities do. Now, on the flip side, more money for low-wage workers potentially means stimulating the economy and those consumers having more money to spend, more money in their pockets, and that could wind up benefiting small businesses around the country as well. So the challenge with evaluating the minimum wage is that there's always been research on both sides of the issue to kind of support whatever viewpoint the person talking about it wants to take. But one report that is widely spoken about and circulated is the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office's analysis of what a $15 an hour minimum wage would look like if you hiked it gradually over the course of several years, hitting $15 an hour by 2025. That report found that it would boost pay for 17 million low-wage workers, but that it would also cost 1.3 million workers their jobs. So you're seeing obviously many more low-wage workers get that nice boost in pay. That could obviously be a good thing for the economy, but then a far smaller amount of workers actually losing their jobs or opportunities because of that progressive hike.
Okay, time for today's numbers round. First up is $30 billion. Microsoft just entered into a multi-year agreement with GM Cruise, the self-driving unit of General Motors. Microsoft will provide cloud computing, software, and hardware services for both GM and Cruise, along with a joint investment totaling $2 billion from partners like Honda Motor. Now, the investment brings Cruise's valuation to $30 billion, nearly doubling from the $19 billion that was estimated by the Wall Street Journal in 2019. Next, $2 billion. Office Depot rejected Staples' $2 billion offer to take over its business for the third time in the company's history. But Office Depot isn't ruling out a deal. In a letter, the company's chairman said that a more efficiently executed deal with less regulatory risk would be considered. Shares of Office Depot fell on the news. And finally, 25,000. It's less than 24 hours until Inauguration Day, and things will look a little different this year. 25,000 National Guard troops are stationed at the U.S. Capitol after deadly riots just 2 weeks ago and threats of more violence surfaced in recent days. And then there's the pandemic. The National Mall, which is normally filled with tens of thousands of spectators, will instead be filled with 200,000 American flags. Joe Biden's inauguration as the 46th president of the United States begins at 12 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. And you can catch all the highlights by going to CNBC.com or downloading the CNBC app. We'll be back here in our home office this Thursday, so be sure to catch us then.